No
Okay.
problem.
All right. We're ready.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning on the 29th of August, 2012, on our webinar regarding workers' compensation claims management. And we want to assist in helping you to navigate the complexity of workers' compensation claims management, especially in California. And as usual, for these monthly education seminars, we bring in our partner and the experts when it comes to loss control and claims management, ESM Solutions. And you've heard her speak in the past, but Sharon Poston will be the moderator of the discussion today. And we appreciate her and what she does for us and our clients, as always. So at this point in time, I'll hand it over to Sharon. And Sharon, thank you very much.
Okay. I'm just going to take a pause here a moment, Adam. I did get a message from someone that we are not connected. So can I see, can you raise your hand if you can hear Adam and myself? There's a place for you to raise your hand. Okay, I'm seeing it. Yep. All right, very good. Thank you.
Where to go? Thank you very much.
Where to go? Thanks. We always have these moments of technical difficulty that are a little disconcerting. But thank you very much, and welcome for joining us today. My name is Sharon Poston, President of ESM Solutions, and we have partnered with Bowermaster and Associates. We really appreciate Adam giving us the opportunity to meet with you and talk about what we are passionate about, workers' compensation. I know it's hard to admit sometimes, but it is true that we really do feel like we want to empower and be passionate with employers to make sure that you do feel like you have the right and responsibility to manage your workers' compensation claims. Today, our topic is going to be to discuss 3 steps to successful claims management, employer reporting requirements, and what your deadlines are. The first 24 hours, because I really feel like that's a window of opportunity when you establish the relationships and the tone of what the claim is going to develop into. The key role of the supervisors, return to work. You've heard that one. I've been preaching that one for quite a while, but I think one of the key ways that you do control claims is by keeping the employee tied to you. And finally, we're briefly going to mention what the insurance industry calls red flags. These are alerts that you should be aware of that might prompt an investigation for a claim. We won't go into a great deal of time on the red flags because that's going to be a follow-up webinar where we talk more about how do you investigate and how do you manage those claims that have been denied and are now litigated. But that's next time. For today, we'll move along and let's take a look at what are those 3 steps to successful claims management. I really sat back and tried to think, okay, what can I tell you as the employer in a nutshell that really would help you get a handle on how can you manage your claims? And I think the first most important thing is that you as the employer assign one workers' comp coordinator to manage your workers' compensation claims for your company. And then you educate and empower that person to make decisions. Now, if you're a small organization, this one person may also be HR, bookkeeping, controller. You know, we wear many hats in a small business. But one person should be responsible, and then begin to educate yourself. And thank you, you're here today to begin to learn how do you manage the claims. The second most important thing to do is reduce lost work days. And you do that through a structured, written return to work program. And finally, frequent and consistent communication with all parties. And by all parties, I mean the team, who would be the injured employee, the supervisor, the doctor, and the claims handler. I really believe that the days, if there ever were these, when as the employer you filed the claim and assumed that everything would be taken care of, I don't think that's true any longer. And especially not true because you are the one who's paying the bill. Now this next slide, you've seen a few times, and I keep putting it up here because I think it's important to know that you as the employer are in the center. And you really are the most important person to facilitate all that happens between the claim handler, the doctor, and the injured worker. Many times I think employers don't feel empowered. It's a complex system. There's language they don't get. There's acronyms that don't make sense. And so today we're going to try and touch on a few of those. And the reason why it's important, is because claim costs are going up. You know, we had a big reform back in 2, 3, and 4 actually, and the total claims cost went from 12 billion, that's a B, a year down to 6 billion. But you can see that we're inching back up because over the last 7 or 8 years, there have been chipping away at the reforms that took place, and that has happened as a result of legislative changes and case law changes. So the total claims count is going up, and that's because the individual claim count is going up. Back in 2005, an average lost time claim was projected at 46,949. Now, one average indemnity lost time claim is projected at $66,922. So the increases are due to medical cost inflation, increase in litigation, and increase in the permanent disability ratings as we're seeing additional psych, stress, sleep disorder, sexual dysfunction added to claims as they are litigated. And what does that mean to you? When the claims costs go up, it gets passed along to you. So we are seeing that the average charge per $100 of payroll back in 2003 was at $6.29. And that means average, that would be a roofer perhaps at the high end that pays a large amount versus a clerical. So the average would be $6.29 per 100. Dropped way down to in 2008, and now we're beginning to see that cost inch back up as the claim values increase as well. All right, let's talk about the basics. What is claims management in workers' compensation? Well, workers' comp is a benefit delivery system that covers you if you are injured on the job. And there are 2 criteria to determine if a claim is compensable under workers' comp. The first factor is, did it arise out of employment? And the second factor is, did it occur in the course of employment? And that's abbreviated as AOE, arising out of employment, and COE, course of employment. You'll often hear a claims person excuse me, say that they are investigating a claim AOE, COE. And it's spoken as one word, AOE, COE. And that means that the claims person is investigating the compensability of a claim under workers' comp. I added in there that California is a liberal construction state, and that is that every judge is mandated to liberally construe the law. What does that mean? If the judge is looking at facts, and he's looking at the facts of the employer and looking at the facts of the claimant, the claimant will always win if the facts are even. They will liberally construe the facts on behalf of the injured employee. You should also know that there is a 90-day window from your date of knowledge in which to investigate and deny a claim. So during that 90-day window, the carrier should be acting, investigating, getting prior medical records, taking statements, perhaps getting a qualified medical evaluation, and taking all the steps that they need to so that if the claim is worthy to be denied, that it is done within that 90-day window. I mean, technically, the employee really has 1 year from the employee's knowledge to report the claim. Now, that doesn't mean that that happens very often, but it does occasionally. Really, what you want to instruct your employees is that they report each claim on a timely basis, and that means right away. In California, there are several types of claims. The first one is a specific claim, pretty easy. You know, you hit your finger with a hammer, it's a specific injury, it occurred in the course of employment, it arose out of employment, usually covered and not questioned. The second type of injury is called accumulative trauma, and you'll hear that referred to as a CT. So a CT claim is repetitive use over a period of time. In California, a CT claim is considered an injury. Now, accumulative trauma usually occurs over the life of a person's employment, especially if they're in a laboring position. It's the cumulative effect of that laboring position that perhaps causes the injury. But the legal CT period is 1 year, and it's the 1 year of last exposure. So let's say your employee leaves your employment on June 1st, gets an attorney, this is usually how it happens, files a cumulative trauma claim. It would be 1 year from June 1st of this year, back a year. So you want to make sure that did they work for you that entire period of time? Are there other employers that should be joined? Whoever is involved in that last year of exposure is on the CT hook. And then the final type of injury, this is one we don't like either. It's the aggravation of a pre-existing condition. In California, Labor Code Section 3208 says that if you take an employee as he is or she is, and if they have an aggravation that is a 1%, very low threshold, 1% aggravation of a pre-existing condition, that is deemed a compensable claim until you can get the person back to their pre-injury status. But we see this often, and it is a very disturbing part of the claims management in California. There are also several types of claims that we'll talk about. The first one would be a first aid claim. No injury, no incident that requires a doctor's visit, but it may be an employee wants to report something that has occurred. And we encourage that, those first aid reporting, and we encourage that you do an accident investigation on all those near misses or first aids, because what you're looking for is a way to prevent anything from happening again. And if it happened once, why? And is there a possibility of it happening again? The first aid claim, and there is a specific definition for this, minor cut, scrape, or bruise, that does contain one doctor visit for observation and one follow-up, can be considered a first aid claim, and the employer is allowed to pay for that claim if they choose. I mean, it's kind of silly. You buy insurance and then you pay your claims anyway. But we'll talk about the reason why that may be a strategy that you want to initiate. The next type of claim is a medical only, called an MO. A medical only usually resolves within 30 to 60, maybe 90 days. It usually involves a one-time trip to the doctor, maybe a follow-up trip, 2 or 3, no lost time from work. Fairly minor, these usually resolve on their own. And the final claim is a lost time claim or an indemnity claim, and this is when the doctor takes a person off work. I see a couple of hands up, and I can't tell if, excuse me here, I'm going to see if there are any questions that are showing. Maybe your hands were just up. Oh, I don't see questions, so okay, sorry for that little interruption. I will go back to my discussion. All right. The next thing I want to talk about are, what are the benefits? Workers' compensation covers injuries on the job. What covers you off the job? Is there anything? What if you break your hand on a bicycling accident over the weekend? Well, that would be covered under your state disability policy. And as an employee, you pay into that state disability insurance. And so you are allowed to receive a wage loss supplement from state disability. Workers' comp would cover you on the job. It gets a little confusing sometimes because state compensation insurance fund is one of the largest workers' comp carriers. So they both have the term state, and it's a little disconcerting. But workers' comp only covers injuries on the job. And these two benefits really are the most important. First of all, medical coverage is provided. There's no deductible, no copay. There are medical guidelines and protocols. This was part of the reform in 2004. Before that, there were no protocols, and it was really a mess. But we now at least have the ACOM guidelines, stands for American College of Occupational and Environmental Medicine. And these are nationwide medical protocols that the doctors should follow for types of treatment for a specific type of injury. Medical treatment also includes durable medical goods, which might mean wheelchair, crutches, braces, and so on. The second benefit is temporary disability. And the temporary disability, or called TD, is paid in lieu of wages when an employee is taken off work. It's based on 2/3 of the average weekly wage, the gross wages, up to a maximum amount, and for this year the maximum amount is $1,010.50. There's a 2-year cap on the length of time that you could collect that. So if you have a high wage earner, and to qualify for that max is around $40 an hour. If you have a high wage earner who's off work for the max time of temporary disability, that portion of the claim is already at $105,000. So you can see that meter clicks up pretty quickly and adds to the total cost of your claim, which which is why we're going to talk about return to work in a moment. There is a 3-day waiting period, and the temporary disability rate is calculated on a 7-day basis. Even though your employee doesn't work 7 days a week, that's how the calculation takes place. There are 3 additional benefits. Permanent disability is compensation for any permanent physical impairment. Permanent disability does not mean permanently disabled. So if you hear someone say they have permanent disability, well, that just means that they have some permanent result. And perhaps you can picture this more clearly if you amputate or cut a finger off. That's permanent. You get compensation for that. But does it mean you can't work or you're permanently disabled? No. It just means that you have some permanent impairment. And there's a formula for that. Now, part of the legislative discussion that's going on right now, and where I'm sitting, I'm kind of looking out at the Capitol. We think the legislative session, the legislators may get this reform through by the end of the week, which is the end of their session, but there is much debate. And one of the things that is going to change would be the increase in permanent disability. They're trying to decide if there are enough offsets in other areas so that that would allow for an increase in the permanent disability ratings. The next benefit is vocational training, and this is in the form of school vouchers. So an employee who is unable to return to work does have an option to go to school. The vouchers range from $4,000 to $10,000, and it's a sliding scale based on their level of permanent disability, and it's a voucher that's paid directly to a school. The employee does not get this money. Unfortunately, not many people actually use this retraining. Only about 3% of those who are eligible actually participate with this vocational training, and so there's talk about eliminating this as maybe a cost saver. The final benefit is a death benefit. This is based on the number of dependents, starting with 1 dependent at $250,000 up to 3 or more at $320,000. This is not paid in a lump sum, but it is paid out at the weekly temporary disability rate. So it takes about 7 or 8 years for the full death benefit to be paid out. If you have a minor child under 18, the death benefit continues on that weekly basis until the child reaches 18. And then up to $5,000 in burial expenses in addition. Okay, grab your pencil and a calculator. I'm going to make you do a quick calculation. Here's the first one. Mary earns $10 an hour. She works a regular 40-hour week. What is the temporary disability rate per week if she's off work? Dun, 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 dun. Okay, you're clicking that one pretty quick. This one's going to be fairly easy. All right, here's the answer. The TD rate, $10 an hour times 40 hours a week, $400 gross weekly wage, times 2/3, or 66.667%, her temporary disability rate would be $266.67 per week. So you can see that's how you calculate it. You do take it on the gross weekly wages. All right, here's another one. John works 20 hours a week. He was working 40 hours a week at the time of injury, but his job is in construction, and the number of weeks per hour that he works can fluctuate as low as 20 and maybe up to 40 hours per week. So how do you calculate that temporary disability rate? If an employee is paid for piecework or hours vary from week to week, then the total earnings from all employers, maybe he works for you and someone else during his downtime, from 1 year prior to the date of injury are taken, divided by 52 weeks, and you come up with an average weekly wage. Then you take that same formula times 2/3 equals the temporary disability rate. So when you're submitting a claim for an employee who is either project-based or seasonal, or maybe their wages fluctuate from week to week, make sure you note that when you put that on your employer's report of injury. You might put the wage as $20 an hour, but when it says how many hours, then you could put varied or seasonal or intermittent, something that would prompt the claims handler to take a look at that and say, oh, I better ask a few more questions to determine what the correct average weekly wage is. And if you do have a truly seasonal employee, I think in terms of fruit processors, tomato processors, for example, the season is only from July to October. They are paid their weekly wage based on what they would have earned during the season. But once the season ends, then the temporary disability ends, because the temporary disability is a wage loss supplement. If they have no wages postseason, then they are not entitled to any temporary disability. So unless the employee can show additional earnings for off-season. Okay, here's the next question. Joe's injured on a Thursday. He's paid for that full day of work. He sees the doctor on the same day and has taken off work until Monday. He returns to work on Monday. Is temporary disability due? Remember I said there's a 3-day waiting period? So Thursday, his wages were paid. The waiting period would be Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because we calculate on a 7-day basis. He returns to work Monday. No temporary disability is due. That 3-day waiting period is waived if the employee is hospitalized overnight or is off work more than 2 weeks. So if they're off work for 2 weeks, they go back and pick up that 3-day waiting period. What are your reporting requirements? Once you learn about the injury, there are 2 state forms that you must complete. The first one is called the Employee Claim Form. The number is DWC, which stands for Division of Workers' Comp. DWC-1 is the Employee Claim Form. The second form that you're required to complete is the Employer Report of Injury or Illness, and that one is called Form 5020. The third form, and there's no specific form for this, a supervisor completes an accident investigation. Now this is not a reporting form, but it is part of the Injury and Illness Prevention Program that an accident investigation must follow each injury. And what are the deadlines for these? The DWC-1 is to be given to the injured worker within 1 day of knowledge. The employer's report of injury is to be reported to the insurance company or a third-party administrator within 5 days of your knowledge. Sooner if possible, but you do have up to 5 days to submit that 5020. And most of the time, you submit that online, I'm guessing, or call it in. I know that some people prefer to complete it and fax it in, and all of those are usually available as options with your insurance company or your third-party administrator. And then finally, that supervisor's accident investigation, that should be completed within 24 hours. You want to do the investigation to find out the cause and the preventive steps you're going to take when the claim is fresh and the incident is fresh in everyone's mind. So that should be completed within 24 hours. Well, what should you do when an injury occurs? These are the steps. Number 1, if it's an emergency, obviously, you call 911. A serious injury, you take the employee to the nearest emergency room. And at that same time, if it's a serious injury, you need to make a call to Cal OSHA and to your insurance company to alert them that the claim has occurred. A less serious injury, I still recommend that you take the employee to your designated occupational clinic. It really is important that you show that concern right off the bat, that you take the employee. You also want to be able to tell the doctor at that time that you do have a return to work program and that you would like work restrictions so that you can consider bringing the employee back right away. And then you contact the occupational clinic either to advise them of the injury or to tell them to submit the first aid bill to you if you do plan to pay for that. Again, I say occupational clinic. I really do encourage you to have a relationship with a clinic that specializes in industrial or occupational injury. You're more likely to get work restrictions. The doctors know the rules and requirements of reporting and understand that you are working with an employee in their work setting. Now, I mentioned call Cal OSHA, and some of you, the hair stood up on the back of your head. I could see it from here. Yes, if you have a serious injury, the employer is required to call Cal OSHA. It is a Cal OSHA reportable, excuse me, and you are to call within 8 hours to the nearest Cal OSHA district if it's a serious injury, serious illness, or death on the job. Now, Cal OSHA has redefined the definition of serious. This was about 2 years ago, AB 2774. And serious is if an employee loses any part of the body, so any amputation. If there's permanent disfigurement, this is kind of difficult because you often don't know if there's going to be permanent disfigurement. And thirdly, if the employee is hospitalized for more than 24 hours other than for observation. So you say to yourself, well, maybe I don't want to call Cal OSHA. Do I have to? No, you don't have to, but if you don't and they find out about it, they will be glad to write you a $5,000 fine. And it sticks pretty well. I did list the Cal OSHA site for finding out your closest district that you can go to if you do need to report a claim. When you call them, just be ready with the time and date of injury, name, accident description, and so on. And I do want you to know that if a public entity is called, fire, police, sheriff, ambulance, and they come to an employer site, they are required to call Cal OSHA. So even if you think it is not a work-related injury, if one of those entities has been called to your site, they're going to notify OSHA. So you need to call OSHA and tell them, number one, it is not a work-related injury, or if it is, what the circumstances are and whether or not you consider it serious. Better to call them, even though I know you're squirming when I say that, better to call them and let them know that you are aware that it is an injury, it is not serious in your opinion, and you do not think that it warranted a call. Okay, let's kind of, that was a lot. We'll sit back here for just a minute and take a look at what do you do in that first 24 hours? Because often when an injury occurs, the medical treatment and healing process is out of your control. What you can control is the relationship that you have with the employee. And as I mentioned early on, setting the tone from the very beginning is what will help the claim resolve in its best optimal result. So you're going to take your employee to the designated clinic and provide reassurance to the injured employee that they will be cared for, that you will try to bring them back to work. You're going to tell them what happens next. If they are off work, they will be receiving a temporary disability payment, and it will pay them within 2 weeks' time, just as their paycheck would. You're going to give them the claim form. You're going to give them the phone number of the claim handler if you have that, your phone number so that they can call you if they need to. You're going to begin right away talking about return to work. Right away, you're saying, we want you back. We're going to find out what you need to be accommodated with your restrictions during your healing period of time, and we're having you back to work. At the same time, you're going to alert the claim handler of any suspicious claims. If there are some red flags that we'll talk about in a minute, those are the things that you want to alert your claims handler to right away. And then you begin completing your accident investigation form. Okay, we are ready for our first polling question, and Adam, you're going to help me out with this.
I will read the question for you, Sharon.
All right. And
So the first polling question.
Okay, hold on here a second. Let me get it up. And
The first polling question is, a questionable claim can be not denied at any time. Is that true or false?
okay, place your answers. We'll give you a few seconds. Let's see, manage the polls. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. I'm not sure what you're seeing now. Ah, here we go. Okay, let me close that again. I told you, Adam, this was a challenge for me. What screen are you seeing? Are you seeing the
We see the results of the poll.
Okay, that's a good thing. I'm not seeing that screen up there now. Oh, there we go. Okay, so 65% of you said false and 35% said true. Let me get on to the next answer. All right, and here's the answer. The answer is false. A claim must be denied within 90 days of the employer's knowledge If it is not denied by the insurer or the TPA, third-party administrator, by the 90th day, then the claim is deemed compensable. This is why it's important that even if you are disputing a claim, and in fact, if you are disputing a claim, even more important that you report it to the insurance company with directions for please delay and investigate, because that's the time, that 90-day window is all we have in which to deny a claim. Now, what if you do have a disputed claim? What do we do about those? Well, there are a couple of reasons to dispute a claim. It could be a medical reason why the claim should be denied, determined to be not work-related medically. It could be a legal denial, and that would usually be maybe a coverage issue. You submitted to the wrong carrier, or the prior carrier should have been involved, something along that line. Or it could be a factual denial. And this occurs when perhaps the employee tells the supervisor one story, tells the doctor another story, tells the HR person another story. The facts are not the same, and there is enough basis for factual denial of a claim. The insurer, the insurance company, must send out a delay notice within 14 days of their notice, and then they have 90 days to investigate. I really think it's important during that 90-day window for you, the employer, to stay actively involved. Once you submit it with your directive to please delay and investigate, make sure you follow up within the next week or so and periodically during that 90 days. Have they taken the statements? Have you been notified to ask questions about what it is that was the reason for your request for the delay in investigation? Has a panel qualified medical evaluator been selected? Have all the prior medical records been obtained if it's a medical dispute? All of those things need to take place during that 90 days of discovery. Now, during that 90-day window, the employee is allowed to get medical treatment, and you want to encourage them to go to the doctor, and up to $10,000 can be paid on that claim or until the claim is denied. So continue your relationship with the employee. Even though the claim may be in dispute, you still have an employment relationship. So make sure that they get treatment, that you know the work restrictions, and you bring that person back to work as soon as you can. We talked earlier about red flags, and you might hear that term from the insurance company. Now, what you're looking at are what are the facts that support did the injury arise out of and in the course of employment? That's that AOE-COE term again. And here are some things that you might consider. Were there conflicting descriptions of accident? As I mentioned, did he or she tell different stories to different people? Was the injury reported late? Now, you know, way back in our earlier slide, I said that they have 1 year to report the claim, but you should have a policy that encourages employees to report claims promptly, and maybe a claim is reported on a Monday or Tuesday and is said that it happened last Thursday or Friday. Well, you have the right to ask questions. What did you do over the weekend? Why didn't you report it on Thursday? And so on. Maybe the claim did not occur in the course of job duties, or it could have been reported late or after termination or layoff. Maybe you don't feel that the duties support the mechanics of injury, and you can ask the claim to be investigated for that reason. There could be other non-work-related causes. Maybe you heard that the employee plays soccer on the weekend or had some other off-the-job injury that you are aware of. You can alert your claims handler to that. Or if the injury was reported after a disciplinary action. If an employee files a stress claim after a disciplinary proceeding, the claim can be denied based on good faith personnel action. So all of those things need to be reported to the insurance company. Don't assume that they're going to get that or know that information. It's really critical that you become involved, submit all of that information to the insurance company, and best to submit it in an email so that you then have that tracking mechanism, because there's often turnover on the carrier side, so you might tell it to one claims person and then you have another claims person, so you want to be able to re-forward any information that you've previously sent. And then continue to communicate with your claims handler. Really follow up with them and develop a relationship so that you understand what their plan of action is. As I mentioned, the really most important cost-saving measure that you as the employer can take is to provide modified or alternative work for an injured employee while they're healing. You might modify their own job duties if you have work restrictions. For example, maybe their job requires lifting 30 pounds on a regular basis and they're restricted to 20. You could temporarily reassign certain tasks. If that's not possible, you might consider alternative job duties, partial work hours, a combination of some other tasks, or you may even consider an alternative work location. Maybe they're be allowed to work from home or transfer to a different department. Any of those would be possible options. Now, in that little red box, I don't know if you can see it, but I think this is an important fact that you should know. And this is from the AMA Physician's Guide to Return to Work, American Medical Association. And it says, in the final analysis, return to work decisions are always those of the patient and his or her employer. The physician's role is merely one of advisor. So the doctor should not be saying to you, off work or total temporary disability. That's your decision. The doctor should be giving you what the person can do or cannot do, and then you will be able to consider whether or not you can bring the employee back to work. All right, let's look at a case study. So here is Joe. He's a 26-year-old maintenance worker, strained his back. Well, the supervisor didn't know where to get medical attention. Supervisor didn't know about any designated medical clinic, so he sent him to the ER, emergency room, for treatment. And the emergency room doctor, who doesn't know you either, is going to err on the side of caution and told Joe to rest for the next couple weeks. Now, the employer did not follow up with Joe, did not get clarification of the return to work restrictions, did not have a designated medical provider, or a return to work policy. So what would you do differently in this case? This was actually a real case, and it was a small employer. Their payroll was about $300,000, and this one claim cost them $8,000 and 42 points on their mod. I'm not kidding. $8,000 claim, 42 points. Their mod went from 87 to 129. They were then over the 125 threshold, which subjected them to the Targeted Inspection and Consultation Fund, which is a fine, from $250 to $10,000 based on their amount of payroll. A potential site visit from Cal OSHA, and this was a contractor, so he was restricted from bidding on certain projects. So you can see that it just takes one little claim that can really make a big difference in your workers' compensation program. Now, what could this employer have done differently? Really, two steps that were a missed opportunity. Number one, if they had provided modified job duties for the 3 weeks that Joe was off work, would have saved 8 points on their mod. If they had had a designated medical provider rather than the emergency room, because this was not an emergency, 12 points on their mod, it would have been a difference of 20 points. Their mod would have been 109, lower workers' comp premium, no TICF fine, no Cal OSHA visit, all of that if they had taken those 2 steps. So I hope this will help you see that it really does make a difference, even on the smaller claims, to do your follow-up and diligence with contacting the employee and all the parties. I wonder how many of you, raise your hand, of course I can't see you, but how many of you include the supervisors as accountable for safety and for claims management? They really are your eyes and ears and the one that has the most direct contact with your injured employee. Usually this is the HR person I'm talking to. You can't do it all, but you really can train your supervisors to help you, assist you with the return to work process. And they really set the tone for taking that employee back to work and making sure that they stay within their restrictions during their healing period of time. All right, let's look at one more case study. Let's see, how am I doing for time? I think we can do this one. Another maintenance worker who injured his left hand as a result of removing boxes and gliding his hand on an aluminum panel. Oof, stitches required. And the work restrictions were one-handed work for 3 weeks in a clean work environment to avoid any infection. So the employer discusses with the employee and offers modified duty, but the employee doesn't show up for the assigned work assignment. What should an employer do? Well, oops, let me go back to that one. The employer should notify the insurance company give them a copy of the written offer of modified work. An employee does not have to accept a position. I mean, it's free country. But if they don't accept the position, they are not entitled to temporary disability benefits. If you are making a valid offer that's within the work restriction, then they have an opportunity to work, so there really is no wage loss. All right, Adam, here we go again. Let me see if I can do this one. We are ready for the next polling question. Okay.
So in this polling question, please identify the one true statement below.
All right, just another minute. Most of you have voted. Okay, place your votes. I'm going to close the polls. Okay, the polls are closed, and I'll share with you the results. 20% said an employer is required to provide a job accommodation. 67% said a job description should identify the essential functions. And 13% said an employee can refuse a modified job and still get TD. All right, let's look at what the correct answer is. And I'll go back here. Okay, the correct answer is B. A current job description that identifies the level of physical tasks required and identifies the essential functions is a requirement. The employer is not required to offer a modified or alternative job, but you should always consider it. So the standard question, the insurance carrier calls you and says, can you provide modified work? Your answer is always, yes, I will consider it. I need to know what the work restrictions are. So once you have the work restrictions, then you can take a look at them, compare them to what the job duties are, have a conversation with the employee, because under Fair Employment and Housing Act, FEHA, there is a requirement that you engage the employee in an interactive process, that means a discussion, to discuss job accommodation. So that is a requirement. C was also incorrect. An employee can refuse a modified job offer, but they will not be entitled to ongoing temporary disability. So make sure that you put the offer in writing, you notify your claims handler if they refuse or don't show up, and ensure that temporary disability is ended or not provided. All right. Okay, a lot of information we just went through in a short period of time. So let me sum it all up. What is an employer to do? Number one, hire the best fit for the job. Take a look at your hiring practices. Are you satisfied with them? Do you get the best applicants? You might consider a pre-hire drug test. You might consider post-offer physicals. Those are some ways that you can maybe weed out those who are not the best fit for the job. The best claims management is not to have an injury, so prevent your injuries with an active injury and illness prevention plan. Also a requirement if you are an employer in California. Make sure that you train your supervisors and your employees to be accountable. All employees should know that you have a return to work plan. They should know that you have a safety program. Hold them accountable. Monitor your goals and reward safety achievements. And maintain a continuous communication plan with the injured employee and, in fact, with the whole team. Make it a team effort. It's the injured employee, the supervisor, the doctor, the claim handler, all of you working together to minimize the impact of and cost of a workplace injury. Make sure you've identified the best doctors in your medical provider. If you have a doctor that is not giving you work restrictions, not cooperating with you in return to work, then maybe it's time to find another doctor. And if you do take these steps, it will lead to success. I have included a few websites for you. These are ones that I've posted in the past, and these will be posted on the Bowermaster website, so you can take a look at them. The final one, the dir.ca.gov, that's the Division of Industrial Relations. That really is a wonderful source for Division of Workers' Comp information, CalOSHA information, the labor code, the regulations, everything. Quite a bit is on that website, so I encourage you to take a look at that as well. All right, Adam, let me see if we have any questions before we dismiss everyone. And I don't see any here. So if you have a question, you know that you can always feel free to either email Adam or myself. We'll be happy to respond and get back to you with answers that you have on perhaps on specific claims. So Adam, that's it for me. Any other comments or questions?
I just want to thank you very much, Sharon, as usual. We always appreciate our partnership with ESM Solutions for our safety and claims management for our clients. This webinar will be posted on our website, so we will be sending a notice out to everyone when that does occur, so you can share it with others in your office and use it for training for your supervisors and those responsible for claims handling in your own operations. And if you would like ESM's involvement on any current claims or future claims, please be sure to contact your Bowermaster advisor, and they will ensure to get that in order and have a further discussion with the ESM team and your advisor on that as well. So we appreciate everyone's participation today and wish you a best rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adam.